You are dead. No longer bound by the mortal coil, you have slipped into what lies beyond. But there is no peace in death. You have things to do, unfinished business to take care of. For the restless dead, there is more to fear than you can imagine. Hello, and welcome to another lore video about Wraith the Oblivion. In the last part, we discussed the aftermath of the Third Great Maelstrom, and in this video, we'll finish the history of the Underworld, so if you missed part 5, you can watch that here first. The shock of those newly dead from World War I, along with the hellish influx of so many restless, caused another titanic maelstrom, the fourth. While the hell winds of Oblivion whipped across the Shadowlands, the Death Lords fled to their citadels, huddling and hiding from its fury. Great hailstones and torrents of effluvia-filled rain lashed Stygia, the necropoli, and the new towers and bridges. Screams of specters who rode the demon winds drove some insane, but the city held. When all was over, those emerging from whatever shelter they had found discovered that the fury of the winds lashed the towers and structures of Stygia, polishing them to a mirror-like brilliance. Stygia survived the maelstrom, but the necropoli did not fare well. Spectres following in the wake of the winds located the new roads to the various citadels in the Shadowlands. They managed to infiltrate them, moving amongst the populace. Once inside, they smashed through the shroud to skin-ride mortals in many cities of the Quick. Spectres infested New York, Chicago, and other large cities where they gleefully encouraged crime and murder. Whole sections of mortal cities played host to the battles among spectres as they sought to kill off their rivals or gain more influence. Massacres of whole families occurred. Some even battled in their human skins, killing one another and being killed so they could experience the death and misery they caused. Further causing chaos in the Skinlands was the collapse of the merchant houses of Europe and America, as bank after bank went under in the years following World War I. The lands were thrown down into the Great Depression, which forced bankruptcy on the rich, destitution on the working class, and destruction on the truly needy. People lost their cars and houses, whole families were broken apart as desperate people sought any work they could get. Misery and hunger stalked the land, and as if in mockery of the Great Maelstrom, great dust storms stripped the land of its vitality. Spectres cackled and capered at the sorrows they had wrought. At last, Charon emerged from his self-imposed exile. He studied the state of the Empire and noted the chaos and destruction wrought by the Maelstrom. He was especially troubled by the specters who still ran amok in the necropoli and in the mortal world. Calling together a group of independent wraiths who had helped defend Stygia from the maelstrom and any other that would agree to hunt down and destroy specters, he formed them into a group called the Doomslayers. Their mission gave them the recognition of the hierarchy, though they were not an official part of it. Charon proposed that they become bounty hunters, hunting down and killing specters wherever they were found, and bringing back proof of their demise. Though the Doomslayers and others were doing their best to curtail the spectral hordes, those evil beings still wormed their way into the politics and lives of the Quick. Spectres tinkered with their invisible influences and whispered lies, spewing hatred and violence into the ears of malcontents across the earth. In the lands of the living, the battlefields once again filled with thousands upon thousands of dead, their souls as newly minted wraiths swallowed up by the necropoli and sent on their way to Stygia. Again, the wounds upon them, whether from bullet or grenade, showed the manner of their deaths. Those who did not fight also arrived, torn, blown apart, starved, or smashed by the bombs dropped on their cities. Then, of course, there were those victims of the greatest atrocity of all, millions dead because they were decided to be unfit to live by the most evil regime in the modern age. War blazed across the Pacific as well, and the Tempest became choked with the bodies of these broken ships. The Second World War raged for many years across Europe, Africa, and Asia. It ended finally when a new weapon was created that wrought destruction on the building blocks of matter itself. Though it was claimed that the new weapon would be used to save lives, many believed that having created such a horror, those responsible were too fascinated by its possibilities, and thus the atomic bombs were dropped. When they exploded, the concussion, roar, and shock penetrated even through the shroud and into the Shadowlands. Flames like those caused by a million suns burst over the underworld for the briefest moment, blinding all who saw them. The labyrinth itself screamed like a wounded beast and split open. In doing so, it vomited forth the fifth great maelstrom, far greater than any that had come before it. The storm thundered across the skies, releasing blistering heat and pressure so intense that any caught in the blast were blown straight to oblivion. Thousands of smaller maelstroms were loosed in its wake. These spread across the Shadowlands, sucking souls into the darkness below and making travel impossible, whether by ship or rail or road. The necropoli became outposts cut off from one another and from Stygia as swarms of specters attacked the citadels. They became islands, harboring any wraiths they could find and desperately fighting for survival. Many fell, and none were unscathed. As the fifth great maelstrom responded to the perversion of life by shaking loose the labyrinth itself, it released a horrid and deadly creature from its bowels. An ancient Malfean known as Gorul arose from the depths of the tempest. Its beastly fangs and claws, great strength, and lashing tail smashed Charon's warships to splinters, breaking them like children's toys as it devoured entire crews. Charon called upon the Death Lords and Necropoli for help in bringing the giant down before it could destroy the whole of Stygia, but not one came. No one would leave their seat of power and risk it being taken over by another. In the end, and in his last act as Emperor of the Dark Kingdom of Iron, Charon stood alone, as he had always from the first moment he had been chosen by the Lady of Fate. Putting aside his mask, he took up his great blade, Siklos. He stepped into his reed boat, and as he had done so many centuries before, faced the beast alone. He challenged the Malfean and attacked. Back and forth the battle raged until Charon drew the baleful form of the beast away from Stygia and its people. In deeper water they fought to a standstill, neither able to best the other. Then Charon, fearing that he would weaken before his enemy did, opened a great whirlpool. He flung his tiny boat and himself down into it, with the horrid beast following after him. The whirlpool closed over the two of them. Neither Charon nor Gorul emerged from that place in the sunless sea where they had gone down into the depths. In the wake of the loss of Charon, Stygia mourned, and while Stygia mourned, the Death Lords moved to consolidate their power. Speaking as one, they told the populace that they would uphold the virtues Charon espoused while seeking to avoid the mistakes he made. They praised his valor and love for Stygia, while making it clear they remembered his missteps as well. And they ended their declaration, their words echoing from behind their masks, with a statement of purpose, that Stygia would continue. Then they immediately went back to scheming against one another. And as wars and revolutions, plagues and mass murders rocked the decades after the Second World War, the Death Lords took in the souls they regarded as theirs, built up their legions, and kept watchful eyes on their neighbors. For the average Wraith, it was a time of relative peace and prosperity, but every so often the maelstrom winds blow, or an acropolis falls, and they are reminded that Oblivion does not give up its prey so easily. In the next Wraith the Oblivion lore video, we'll talk about the economics of the Underworld. Remember, Restless Dead, life can get worse after it ends.